Hello everyone, Charcoal here and welcome to another discussion video. Today we're continuing my Wings of Fire Arc 1 review series, where I work my way through the first 5 books of the series for the first time in almost a decade and give my thoughts on them, all leading up to a big video where I take every book in the main canon and rank them all. Next up is Book 2, The Lost Heir, and my style of writing this review is going to be a little different this time around in that I'm writing the script as I read the book. I wrote the review for Part 1 before reading Part 2 and so on. Let's dive in, pun entirely intended. Gotta say, the prologue was pretty good. It was nice to see Webbs' point of view, and this is also where Nautilus, Cirrus, and Crocodile are introduced. Knowing about Crocodile's twist coming later and what we learn about Cirrus in Book 8, it's kinda neat to read this again knowing these two are not what they seem. This prologue serves as setup for some events in this book, as well as hinting at something even bigger down the road. What exactly it is still kept a mystery though, to keep the audience wanting more. I like that. Let's get started on the book itself. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't enjoy this section that much. For one thing, Tsunami isn't very likable here. She constantly thinks of the other Dragonets of Destiny as nuisances that hold her back, except when she thinks she's in danger, in which case then she thinks about how they might be of use to her. She specifically cites Clay for being passive because it means he won't argue with her. She comes off as being really ungrateful, but I'm not gonna say right now whether that's a good or bad thing, because thinking about it, that's probably the point, and Tsunami's arc will probably be her facing the consequences of thinking like that and realizing she was wrong. For the record, I do like that there's conflict between the Dragonets. They're in a whole new environment now that they're out of their cave, and they're all reacting to it differently. Of course they're gonna clash sometimes. And now with Starflight being instructed by Moros here to be more bossy, I fully expect sparks to fly. It's just that Tsunami's whining becomes really irritating after a few pages. Also, Part 1 is incredibly short. Part 1 in other books usually takes up almost half of it, or at least a third like you'd expect it to, but this is only 60 pages. The cutoff is way too soon. Not enough has happened yet. By the end of the first act, we should have a clear end goal in mind for our characters. Let's use Book 1 as an example. The Dragonets have a goal, to be free. The transition from Part 1 to Part 2 is going from one obstacle to another on the path to achieve that goal, in this case going from escaping the cave to escaping the Sky Palace. That's not the case here. Their only goal is to hide and try not to die, I guess. If the POV characters don't entirely know what's going on, how is the reader supposed to know what's going on? And all Tsunami really wants is to see her family, which she's right on the cusp of getting with very little issue. There's no tension. Things just kind of happen. I don't know, this part was pretty boring. Hopefully things pick up in Part 2. Yeah, not so much. There are some things here that I enjoyed, but it took way too long for the plot to really get going. Coral's introduction is pretty nice, although Tsunami brushing off her friends still rubs me the wrong way, but don't worry, that'll come back into play later. What follows is very boring. We get a council meeting that goes on for way too long, and Tsunami pretty much does nothing but just sit there. I like that they're taking time to show how the palace works and flesh out the Sea Wings a bit, but the whole exchange is very dull and is only there for exposition. Like Scarlet being missing, and Gil, the Sea Wing Tsunami killed in Scarlet's arena, turning out to be Tsunami's father. It's a neat twist, and it had the potential to be something really great. I remember reading this for the first time all those years ago and thinking something along the lines of, holy sh**, Tsunami committed patricide. But all that comes of it is Tsunami feeling guilty for a few chapters, and it never comes up again. That's followed by some aquatic lessons with Whirlpool and then Riptide, which aren't as boring, but why does there need to be a romantic subplot? What is the point of this? It doesn't add anything. I don't mind Riptide as a character, and I think his banter with Tsunami is kind of fun, but why did he need to be a love interest? Tsunami, you just escaped your cave like a week ago, and you've only known this guy for a day. Seriously? The next couple scenes I actually quite like. Tsunami learning about the princess eggs and deciding to protect the last one herself, and then saving Clay from the Summer Palace flooding. The former is what finally gives Tsunami an actual, tangible goal for this story, making sure the egg hatches safely. The one issue I take with it is that it comes way too late. This is halfway through the book. What is up with the pacing here? I would have liked this to happen a lot sooner, maybe after Tsunami finishes meeting Coral and everyone. And then after she secures Coral's trust to protect the egg, that's when the cutoff happens between parts 1 and 2. I feel like that would have flowed a lot better. Tsunami saving Clay was also a pretty nice scene, but I feel like it comes a bit too soon. This feels like the climax of Tsunami's character arc, learning that the royal life isn't all it's cracked up to be and how much she really cares about her friends, and having to step up and save one of them when her brushing them off and putting too much trust in Coral's staff puts them in danger. Having it be here in part 2 makes it feel like the story is already over, even though the egg hasn't hatched yet and we've still got a lot of pages left. Oh, and Webbs is back, and now he and Riptide are in danger of being executed, so that's something. I also need to mention animus magic here because this section is where we learn about it for the first time in the series. It's kept pretty mysterious and out of the spotlight in this arc, usually just used to explain the existence of some magic items, but I love the info we get about Albatross here, which as we all know, Tui would later come back and elaborate on in Darkstalker. Anemone acts as our gateway into learning about this stuff, and she's fine. I don't particularly like her in this book, but she doesn't do anything to make me dislike her either. I do think what Tui did with her in Arc 2 made her far more interesting, but in this book she's just okay. I want to talk about Coral here too. I'm not a fan of her. She's very abusive and overprotective toward her children, and yeah, I can see why she's so overprotective. Most of her daughters did get murdered for an unknown reason, so of course she's going to want to keep any survivors safe, but that only makes her going overboard understandable, not justifiable. I'd like her a lot more if she faced some consequences and learned from her mistakes, but she never does. After this book, her behavior barely changes. That, and she's very inconsistent with showing authority. In one scene, she has no problem with killing Tortoise for something that wasn't her fault, but then later she just caves to everything Blister says to her. It's really jarring. So overall, Part 2 was pretty boring. It had its share of good moments, but I feel like it was dragged out for too long. But I remember what's coming in Part 3, and I am hyped. Part 3 was pretty fun, but I do have to question the importance of some of these events. The statue fight is the big climax, and I like that scene a lot, but it feels like that's where the story should have ended. Everything that comes after feels really unnecessary because it's completely unrelated to the main plot being Tsunami solving the princess murders. Whirlpool attacking Tsunami? Nothing to do with the princess eggs at all. He's just kind of a creep in what few scenes we see him in, and then suddenly he has this elaborate plan to groom Anemone or Auklet and become king? That came way out of left field. I get that in a lot of stories the twist villain is usually someone we already know and weren't expecting, but I feel like a twist should make you look back on the character and realize that it actually makes sense because of subtle hints that were dropped. That's not the case here. Whirlpool kissed Coral's feet a lot, but that was about it. It wasn't made clear just what he was willing to do to become king. He was a creep, sure, but was never shown to be a killer. Now, the Skywings bombing the Summer Palace, also nothing to do with the princess eggs or really the Dragonets of Destiny at all. Crocodile tracked webs, not the Dragonets. It's a really cool scene, but why did this have to happen? Not every book needs to end with a kingdom getting upended. Part 3 can be summed up as a lot of spectacle with not much substance to back it up besides the statue fight. The plot should have ended there. Whirlpool's reveal and the palace bombing just feel tacked on to pad out time and squeeze in another action scene. Let's wrap this up. The epilogue here is really good. It shows us the aftermath of the palace bombing, and we learn of the false Dragonets of Destiny for the first time. I like the little hints they keep dropping in the prologues and epilogues. They add a lot of suspense. Not much else to say here, though. So, Book 2 is honestly not that good. I'd describe it as frustratingly average. It has a handful of good moments, particularly near the end, and all the pieces to create a really interesting narrative are there, but a large chunk of the book is very boring, and the pacing is all kinds of screwy. I don't dislike it overall, but I can't say I see myself coming back to it again. Definitely the weakest of the arc so far, and hopefully it stays that way. I'll give The Lost Heir a 5.5 out of 10. Fan art time. Today we have pieces from Cat, Your Insurance, Silvertail, Galactical Bug, and Love Skittles. Thanks a bunch, guys. This has been Wings of Charcoal, and I will see you all in the next video.